recording. There we go. And really what we wanted to do, like I said today, is just kind of get the basic chair in here. One of the things we want to be aware of course, is that the center of our the cursor, right? The cursor is not on the pivot, right? And that's important when you're building objects, because by default, even if it's not going to orient to the actual orientation of the cursor like we did last time, it will build based on the position, right? So if you were to go, add mesh cube, you see how it kind of puts it right there where the cursor's at. Well, I want to put it in the middle, right? I want that center for that cube to be the actual pivot of the whole entire world, the center of the world, the origin, right? That's that little orange dot right there. So remember, if you go to, in object mode, right, for object mode, if you go to object, there is an area called snap, and you'll see there's cursor to world origin, right? We saw cursor to selected the other day, cursor to world origin, right? And you see, boom, that snaps your cursor to the world origin. That way, when I go to add mesh cube, you see how it builds this cube right on the center of the world as its own object, right? So I can go over here, double click, call it, car chair, or car chairs. There we go. Now remember, I don't want to move the object itself, right? So I'm going to go to 3 for faces. And the nice thing is face is already selected, so I can just hit W for move. Remember, if they're not, though, you can always select, and then, you select linked, right? Select linked. I've, of course, set my own quick key to that. And we're going to move this over, and you'll notice that by moving the faces, it keeps the origin, right? That little orange dot in the cursor kind of on the center of the whole entire world, which is useful for how our mirror modifier is going to work, right? So I do that so that the mirror modifier works properly. So I'll hit R for scale, middle mouse button to scale that down a bit, W for move. Remember, you can grab these squares and it moves 2 axes, right? R for scale, left click drag the blue, left click drag the green, right? That's your Y and your Z axis. I'm going to move that down and forward a little more. And there, of course, is the starting point for our first cushion, right? Maybe scale it a little more on the Y. Maybe a little more on the red. There we go. And then, of course, I want to copy this because, I've already got this. I want this chair to be one object, so I'm just going to duplicate those, right? So remember, Mesh Menu has Control-D for duplicate. So I'm just going to hit Control-D. Now I'm going to left-click so that it just duplicates right on top of the other one, right? If you left-click drag, it'll move it, which sometimes is really cool. In this case, I didn't want to do that, though. So I hit W for move, and I can grab that little red square because that'll move that the Y and the Z, the green and the red, green and blue together, right? And of course, I can hit E for rotate. Rotate this down a little bit. There we go. And you can see we can start to kind of get our cushions kind of in place, right? Now, in this case, what if I wanted to scale? Now that I've got this kind of at a rotation that's not exactly lined up the world, if I turn my scale tool on and I scale, it's going to do that, right? And uniform scale is not going to give me what I want. So remember, you can go and select a specific face. You can go to the global menu up here, right? This is your transform orientations, and this one's your transform pivot point, right? So these guys right up here. Now I'm going to set this to normal, and you see how it actually aligns this manipulator to the face in its normal direction, right? Which is the way the direction the face is rotated, it's pointing. So that's perfect. It's perfectly lined up with the axis that I want. Because you'll notice if I select everything, it might work perfect. In this case, it is. But sometimes it doesn't, right? So sometimes what I'll do is I'll just go, normal. And then I'll go back in here and hit plus. And you can actually assign this to a quick key. That can actually be assigned to a quick key, guys, right? So you can actually even assign that plus to a quick key. So I'm going to click on it, and you see that now there is a face that's saved. And that's the actual orientation saved for that. So once you start to understand those, you've actually got some really awesome ability to reorient your manipulators in Blender. They're actually, honestly, basically up there with Modo, which is had one of the nicest ways for reorienting manipulators I'd seen. So I can grab the green, and you see how I can scale down just along that axis. I can hit W for move. Move green up, right? And you see we can just kind of orient and adjust that to kind of fit exactly what we want to. Now, of course, we can go in here. We could click on the X to kind of just get rid of that. So you could save it and keep coming back to it, right? So if it was saved, you could click on it again, switch to different stuff, switch back to it, right? It's saved. You can come back to it again. But in this case, I didn't need it anymore, so I just clicked X to get rid of it. And then, of course, we can add some modifiers to this. So we can go over to our blue wrench. add modifier, right? Mirror. And because we made sure to recenter that cursor on the origin, and we move the faces themselves, not the object. If you move the whole object, its origin moves too. So that's why I selected faces to move them, so that the origin didn't move. That way when we mirror, it mirrors perfectly over the center of the world. Of course, I can then go to add modifier, and I can add subdivision surface. Remember, we always turn those triangles on. Go back to object mode, so I can right-click shade smooth, right? That smooth shades that. And then, of course, we can go back into face mode, Alt-C, right? So I can put some edge loops in. Remember, Alt-C is your loop cut. So I can left-click drag down here. I could left-click drag back here. And slow this allows us to add some extra edge loops to sharpen the shape up. Remember, if you just left-click, it puts it right in the center. And then, of course, we can keep adjusting the shape, right? So I could Q for my regular selection tool. If I wanted to, remember, Q toggles through. You can set your own quick keys as well. It's a tweak tool. 3 for faces. And then I can just hit W for move this down a little bit, maybe forward. 2 for edges, right? Double left click, select an edge loop. I can move this forward a little bit. Alt-C for loop cut, right? Remember, it's right here, but Alt-C is the quick key for it if you're using industry compatible. I can just loop cut, slide that in there. And I just give myself a little bit of ergonomics. Remember, double left click. There we go. Get a little bit of ergonomics for that cushion. And then, of course, I could Alt-C to put a loop cut there. In this case, I'm just going to left click to put those right in the middle. And then left click to put those right in the middle. It automatically snaps to the middle if you just left click. If you left click drag, you can drag it, right? And so you can easily just kind of switch to face mode, switch to your regular selection tool again. Move those forward a little bit. Grab those 2 faces. We can move those up a little bit. And then even, grab edges. Of course, we can use shortest path for that. In this case, I'll just kind of leave it. We can easily kind of give ourselves a little bit of ergonomic shape to it, right? And that's kind of the basic idea we wanted to go about with this, is kind of, adding your edge loops in. So I can loop cut, drag there and there just to sharpen those up a little bit. And we basically just wanted to get ourselves to that point where we created some cubes, we mirrored and put it in subdivisional modifier, and just did some shaping to it, right? So the cushions don't have to be terribly crazy or detailed, right? Because remember, we're going to kind of just see these through the window itself, through the windows. So we just kind of wanted the basic hint of chairs. You could add a little more if you wanted to, but mostly stuff we already actually know, right? But just kind of getting to reinforce it more, seeing it some more. All right, so that'll be a great place to stop our recording.